Hey guys, welcome back to my YouTube channel. In this video, I am going to talk about dovetailed blanket test with hand forged hints. Hey everyone, here is how I built a commissioned blanket chest. I like the concept of traditional cedar hope chests where the wood's essential oils serve to repel bugs from wool items. However, I am not a big fan of the look of cedar. It is quite impossible to find knot free. It's hard to finish and yellows over time, so I decided to use cedar only for the bottom of the chest so as to reap the insect repellent benefits while making my life easier and allowing, in my opinion, a better aesthetic. Further, now the supplies. These are all the tools and materials which are used for this project. Step 1. Build that lumber. Nothing new here. If like me you bought rough board, you have two options. Either plane everything by hand for 3 days, making wheelbarrows of shavings and some fat muscle gains along the way. Been there, done that for my tool chest. Or hear me out there, make a very good friend with a very well equipped workshop and plain joint resaw everything in one big afternoon while having fun. Your call, really. I went with option 2. Step 2. Dovetailed carcass. First, I glued my panels, not much to it. Once the lumber is as or as, I like to sandwich two adjacent pieces in the vise and take a few passes on the edges that will be glued together with my jointed plane to ensure a gap less fit. Careful that there is such a thing as too much clamping pressure, which can cause joint starvation by squeezing out all the glue as well as panel warping. Once the glue has set, I take my jointed plane to the panels on the both sides to bring them to true flatness. Then I trim length and width to the final size while making sure that everything is absolutely square. Step 3. The till. The till front red cedar and bottom quarter sawn red oak are installed as glued tenons in the panels. The till's back and sides are the carcass itself. The lid pivots around to 10 mm popular dowels drilled in the lid and in the carcass. A chamfer is planed then rounded to allow the lid to rotate around these pivot points without hitting the carcass. Step 4. Cedar bottom. The bottom of the chest is made out of red cedar. Cedar is enjoyable to plane and can make smooth shavings, but it is prone to tear out due to the many knots, so don't frustrate yourself trying to achieve a mirror finish with the plane and accept that you will have to sand it. Step 5. Lid. The lid is made of a panel of maple and two breadboard ends made of quarter sawn oak to ensure that the lid remains planar with changes in moisture and temperature. Here is a link with a few different methods to achieve breadboard ends. I was not aware of the proper way to join breadboard ends, so no gap appears over time, but I could have found out about it if I spent 5 minutes on an internet search. I will do that for the next one. Step 6. Breadboard joinery. Accentuated details. The breadboard ends are glued to the wood panel with a tongue and groove joint. I first considered leaving that joint flush just because we have two different wood species and because it is only glued on half the length. I think it was bound to open and close a bit over time and that the flushness would be lost to wood movement, so I decided to chamfer slightly both sides of joint to accentuate its presence rather than try to make it seamless. Step 7. Dovetailed skirt. After dovetailing the carcass, this should be child's play. Only 12 more dovetails to cut. The skirt is also made of maple. I start by dovetailing one corner and leaving the two pieces extra long by about an inch. aligning this corner on my carcass with clamps. I then use the carcass to make a precise knife line on the inside of the one side of the skirt. Step 8. Front skirt arch. Arches are cool. Let's make one. This was a compromise for me between the heavy look of a full skirt and the distracting convolutions of extra volutes and coping exercises. This arch is not compound or anything fancy. It is just a section of a large diameter circle that I drew using Dremel points. I clamped the front piece of the skirt, the only one receiving an arch, in my vise, marked a line from the middle of it down the workbench, and planted my extra large compass on the line, playing with the diameter until I was satisfied with the outcome. Step 9. Sanding the insides glowing. Now that we know that everything is assembled, everything is disassembled, the inside of the chest will be left unfinished to allow that cedar aroma to permeate, and also because I like the feel of raw wood and wool better together. The inside parts of the carcass, the lid and all tail parts are sanded progressively to 320 grit, damped with a rag and sanded at 320 again after drying. Step 10. Make your own molding. From leftover red oak, I cut and hand planed to S4S some 3 × 4 inches square profile sections of wood. I then clamped my router in my workbench because I do not own a router table, and with a clever setup of bent dogs and clamps, I routed a curve in these, the radius of which matches the radius of the lid, 3 × 4 inches. Step 11. Miter, nail and glue molding. This is quite simple, but you want to get it right. First, I cut a 45-degree miter on one end of two sections of molding. Then I butted these on the skirt and held them tightly to form one corner. At this stage, using two pieces allows you to align perfectly with your corner, as well as making sure that the matching angles are indeed gapless. Holding one piece of molding in place, I scribe a fine line while registering my marking knife flat on the carcass, and I mark the waist to ensure a great fit. Step 12. Hinges Part 1. Forging. From the 1:8 stock, I cut two 18-inch sections for the lid part of the hinges. I then drew these out to a fine taper, pushing a blob of extra metal to the end that I then flattened into a decorative round end. Step 13. Hinges Part 2. Cutting and drilling. The hinge barrel is split with a hacksaw and removal of the excess metal using an angle grinder, bench grinder, sander, files, etc. Then 3 holes are drilled and countersunk in each half of each hinge to accommodate the mounting screws. Step 14. Interlude. Homemade beeswax paste. I needed a wax paste to finish both the metal and the shell-lacked test, so I decided to drum roll make my own, as I kept bees last summer and got some nice comb honey inspired by the Barefoot Forge, so check them out. Step 15. Hinges Part 4. Pinning the pins. The pins are reweighted by cold pinning with a hammer. Basically, we are mushrooming the ends until they cannot slide out of the hinge barrel anymore. To make this easier, you can begin by tempering the pin, heat it up to cherry red and let it cool slowly to air. This will especially help if you use power tools to cut the pin, which can lead to work hardening of the metal on the ends. Step 16. Hinges Part 3. Finishing and custom screws. With the hinges forged and drilled and the barrels pinned and painted, now was time to apply a finish to them. I heated them to about 700 Fahrenheit in the forge, quenched them in canola oil and wiped them while still hot with the rag generously loaded with my beeswax paste. Step 17. Installing the hinges. Installing the hinges should be a walk in the park. Simply lay them where they will be attached and mark. Then cut a mortise deep enough to allow the lid to fully close. I cut the mortise a bit shallow and increase the depth little by little with a router plane until I reached a flat lid. Step 18. Finishing and assembling. Well, I am no finishing expert, so take all of this with a grain of salt. I am happy with the results, but definitely see room for improvement and could use some practice to make the whole process more straightforward and efficient. Thank you.